بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا كريم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear respected viewers. Inshallah, today we'll begin discussing some matters related to, directly related to the Salat. We'll begin the conditions of Salat. We've spoken in detail already about the condition of tahara, purity, and the entrance of the time of the Salat, the times of Salat. So there are remaining 4 conditions that we'll touch on inshallah ta'ala today. And when discussing Salat, we talk about the conditions, those requirements before the Salat. We talk about the pillars of the Salat, those acts that are required during the Salat. If any of the conditions are left out or any of the pillars of the Salat are left out, they're both obligations, then the Salat is invalid. We speak about the wajibat, the necessary acts in the Salat. If they are left out, then the Salat is deficient. And if one forgets a wajib act, then that must be repaired, or that must be followed with sajdat at-tilawa, the sajdat as-sahw, the prostration of forgetfulness. We talk about the sunan, those emphasized traditions within the Salat. If they are left out, the Salat is deficient from perfection, but it is still valid. Those things which are mustahabbat, commendable acts within the Salat, those things which are adab, etiquettes of the Salat, that which is makruh, if you do it, the Salat is deficient but still valid, those things which are disliked. And then finally, those things which are mufsidat, which render the Salat invalid. So today, inshallah, we'll begin discussing the shurut, the conditions for the validity of the Salat. So that is the definition of the shart, those things which must be fulfilled before the Salat. So the Salat is dependent upon the presence of these conditions before the Salat. So they are external to the actual Salat itself, but the validity of the Salat is pinned on having fulfilled these conditions. And they are six shurut, they are all fard, they are all obligations. And 3 of these 6, they are required before the initiation of the Salat to be present and to continually be present throughout the entire Salat until the end of the Salat. So that is tahara, purity, covering of the awrah, the private area, and facing the qibla. These 3 conditions must be present at the beginning of the Salat, like the remainder of the conditions, but also these 3 conditions, they must be present and they must continue to be present until the end of the Salat for the Salat to be valid. So the first of those 6 is at-tahara. The Salat is invalid without tahara, and we spoke in detail concerning tahara from the ritual impurity, from the physical impurities, which are the physical impurities if they have, if it is an amount which is not pardoned, purity from these types of najasat, impurities, in the clothes, in the body, or on the place of Salat. So once again, to mention these types of tahara, these 4 points. Number 1, that the body of the person who is performing Salat is pure from the minor hadath, the minor ritual impurity, and the major ritual impurity. So he's done his wudu or ghusl or tayammum, whatever needs to be done. And the woman, after the completion of the menses, purity from the menses or post-natal bleeding, has done the ghusl. So that condition must be fulfilled. Secondly, that the body of the person who is performing Salat be pure from the najasa, the physical impurities. We said the physical impurities which are not pardoned. That which is pardoned, we said, is قدر الدرهم في المغلظ. Concerning the heavy filth, we mentioned the types of heavy filth. If it is the more than the amount of a dirham, of a 50-cent coin or the inner part of your palm, more than that is not pardoned. If it is the amount of the dirham, then if a person performs salat with this amount of najasa, of the heavy type, then the salat is valid, but that person has committed something which is makruh tahriman, prohibitively disliked. Thirdly, that his clothes in which he is praying are pure from the najasa. Again, that the amount of a najasa which is not pardoned. So that is a condition. And the clothing, anything that you are wearing, that includes a cap or even the khuf on one's feet. Fourth, أن يكون المكان, that the place on which the person is performing the salat is tahir, is pure from any impurities, from any najasa. And when we talk about the place, that the place must be pure, that means that the place on which you are coming in contact, the surface that you are coming in contact with, the parts that are coming in contact with that surface, that area must be clean. So that's specific to the place of the feet, the place of the hands, the place of the knees, and the place of the forehead and the nose. So these spots that you are coming in contact with must also be tahir, free from any of the najasat that we spoke about. So this is concerning tahara. And then an additional point, it's a condition to be in that state of purity and also to have belief that you are in a state of tahara from the hadath, from the ritual impurity, and from the khabath, from the physical impurities. So if he prays on the basis that he's muhdith, that he's in a state of that ritual impurity, which prevents the salat from being valid, or that he prays with the belief that on his clothes there is najas, there is impurity, but then he finds out later on, it becomes evident that there was no physical impurity in contact with him, and he was not in a state of ritual impurity, he had his wudu, that salat is invalid. That salat is invalid. Because the conditioning, he must also believe that he is tahir from the najasa. So that's important to remember. Secondly, satrul awra, covering of the awra. The salat is invalid without covering of the awra, the private area, when he is able to cover it. If he has the clothes to wear to cover his awra, then he must cover the awra, the private area. The private area is that which you must cover, and it's haram for a person to look at, for another person to look at, with the few exceptions. So even if you are alone, and even if you're in a dark room, you still must have this private area covered. And that, as we said, is from the beginning of the salat until you complete the salat, the private area must remain covered. So to begin immediately with the limits of the awra, the private area of the man, which cannot be exposed during the salat, is from below the navel to past the knees. From below the navel, the belly button, to past the knees, to the end of the knee. So according to the Hanafi school, the knee is from the awra as opposed to the navel. The navel itself is not from the awra. Instead, from below the awra till past the knee. As for the woman, her awra is the entire body except for the face and the palm, that includes the back of the hand, that is not from the awra, and the feet. So everything except the face, the hands, and the feet is awra for the woman. So that must be covered during salat. And there is there are some slight details which are usually can be discussed also in those things which invalidate the salat. But we'll mention them here. If a quarter of that part or section of the aura is exposed before a person enters into the salat, then it is as if you have not entered the salat. If during the salat the aura is exposed, the private area is exposed, without his own doing, without his or her own doing, then the salat is invalidated with two conditions. So a quarter of that portion of the private area has been exposed without one's intentional doing. During the salat, then the salat is invalidated with two conditions: that the time for which it was exposed was the time that it takes to perform a pillar of salat, which the scholars say the time it takes to say 3 tasbihat, subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. So that's the first condition. It was exposed for that long. If it was exposed for the time it takes to say subhanallah once or twice, and then that person immediately covered the aura, it was exposed, then immediately covered once again, then the salat is still valid. Unless he intentionally uncovered, exposed that private area by his own doing, then there is no delay. Immediately the salat is invalidated. The second condition is, as we said, it must be ruba'. It must be the amount of a quarter of that portion or section of the private area of the aura. So what are those portions that we need to be careful of? Usually it is the lower back that becomes exposed when people are in ruku' or sujood, if not careful. The pants are low and the shirt goes up and the aura becomes visible, exposed. So that is a portion from the line beneath the belly button. Draw an imaginary line all around the sides to the back, down to just before to the pubic area. So that is all one portion. That is all one portion. So the lower part of the stomach to the pubic area, all the way around to the back, the lower back, all of that is one portion. So if a quarter of that is exposed, a quarter of the entire section is exposed, then for the length of that ruku' or that sujood, then the salat is invalid. So that's very important to be careful of. So if it's the whole lower back, then that's half of that section, because it's just the person's back that was showing. For example, the lower back from beneath the line that's below the belly button to the pubic area, all of that, if the whole back was showing, that's half, then that is invalidated. But if it is just a small tear, for example, a person's pants, there's a small tear and a tiny part of the thigh is showing, that does not equal a quarter of that section of the private area. So that's another section. Each thigh, including the knee, that's a whole section on its own. So that's two separate sections. So if a quarter of that is exposed, is showing for the length of a rukun, then the salat is invalid. And finally, concerning the awra, what is problematic for the validity of the salat is a person's view that is in line with you or parallel to you. If you are able to see the private area from your chest, from your collar, you look in and you can see the private area below, from above, from that hole, that does not harm, that does not affect the validity of the salat. You are still considered as covering the awrah, or if somebody from below, on a level below, can see beneath a person's clothing, if someone was to look, that they could see the awrah could be exposed from that angle, that does not affect the validity of the salat. So what needs to be covered is what people can see who are in line with you. The third condition, istiqbalul qibla, facing the qibla. So the salat is not valid without facing the qibla when one is able to face the qibla, when one is able to face the qibla. So there are two cases. A person can either see the Kaaba or cannot see the Kaaba. So the person who can see the Kaaba, he must face the direction, he must face the actual Kaaba itself. If he can see the Kaaba, so he's in Al-Masjid Al-Haram, he has view of the Kaaba in front of him, he must face the actual Kaaba itself. Even if he's a few degrees off from the direction of the Kaaba, then the salat is invalid. He must be facing directly towards the Kaaba. So this is going to apply to the person who's actually in Mecca, and not just only in Mecca, but he can also see the Kaaba. He has direct view to the Kaaba. So he must face the actual Kaaba because that is within his ability to actually face the Kaaba with certainty. Then the second case is for the person who cannot see the Kaaba. This person, he's required to face the direction of the Kaaba. The direction of the Kaaba. So that is the Qibla, the direction of Salat, for the person who is unable to see the Kaaba. So this is obviously for those who are outside of Mecca, or anyone who is actually in Mecca, like we said, but cannot see the Kaaba, does not have a direct view of the Kaaba, then this person only needs to face the direction in which the Kaaba is in. So if in the city that you're living in, the Qibla or Mecca or the Kaaba is towards the west. So even if I'm a bit off, I'm facing a bit northwest or southwest, that's still considered to be towards the direction of the Kaaba. But if the Kaaba is west of where that person is and he's facing north, then the salat is invalid. Or he's facing south, then the salat is invalid. Concerning the two excuses for the person who is sick, so he's unable to, he's so sick and ill that he cannot even turn himself towards the direction of the Kaaba, towards the Qibla. There's no one there to help him. Or even if there's someone there to help him, it's going to cause harm for him to be moved from towards the direction of the Kaaba. So this person, he prays in whatever direction he's able to. The other person, if a person in a state of fear of an enemy or fear of a dangerous animal, a predatory animal, so this person is also excused. If he faces towards the Qibla, he might be harmed or he's in danger from that enemy or from that animal. Then and he fears that he might be attacked or he might be harmed from another direction, so he faces whichever direction is safer for him to face. Concerning the fourth condition, waqtu salat, we spoke in detail concerning the timings of the salat. So salat is invalid if performed before the time of that salat enters. And as we said with the tahara, purification, a person must have belief that he is in a state of tahara. If he prayed without the belief that he's in a state of tahara, but then he found that he was actually in a state of tahara, the salat is still invalid. Likewise with the time, a person must also have belief, a degree of certainty, a ghalabat dhann, a strong assumption that the time of Salat has entered. Time of Salat has entered. So if he begins the Salat, Allahu Akbar, and he's in doubt, is it actually Salat al-Maghrib or not? Is it actually the time of Salat al-Maghrib or not? He's in doubt, 50-50. He's not sure of anything. He does not have that degree of certainty that the time of Maghrib has entered. The Salat is invalid, even if later on he found out, yes, it was the time of Maghrib. So he prayed in doubt that time of Salat al-Maghrib has entered. Later on, he checked the time. Yes, it looks like that was correct. The time of Salat had entered, Salat al-Maghrib. The Salat is still invalid. So the time of the Salat has to actually have entered, and also he must believe that the time of Salat has entered by whatever means he has and signs he has available. Also, so the opposite is true. If he believed that the time of Salat had entered, and then if he found out that no, he actually prayed before the time of Salat entered, the Salat is invalid. So these are the two conditions. He must have knowledge that the time of Salat has entered, and the time of Salat has to have actually, in reality, entered. One of them on its own is insufficient. Concerning the fifth condition, an-niyyah. Niyyah is the intention, the will, the determination to do an act, in this case the Salat, such that the act of worship is differentiated from a habit or a custom or an ordinary act that a person is doing. The intention is to make the reason for your Salat solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're rising for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the understanding of intention in acts of worship. Your intention is solely for the sake of Allah Ta'ala alone. And here we are talking about if somebody asks you what you're doing, then your instant obvious answer would be Salat. That means the person now in his mind, he has the determination, the intention, the will to perform the Salat. So it's an act of the heart, an act of the heart. The intention is formed in the mind. As for pronouncing it, verbalizing the intention, then this is commendable because it is assisting the formulation of the forming the intention in the heart. Also, according to the Shafi'i school, it is commendable. Other schools do not recommend this. So there is flexibility in the matter. So concerning the intention, the Salat is invalid without that intention, without the intention of Salat. Now, beyond the intention of performing an act of worship, which is the Salat, whichever Salat I'm performing, that intention needs to be there in the heart. And an additional obligation is when it is fard or wajib. When the Salat is fard, an obligatory prayer, now you must specify which fard you are praying. So you make the intention, I intend the fard of dhuhr. I intend the fard of asr. In your heart, I am praying the fard of dhuhr, the fard of asr. So to specify which fard salat you are praying, to specify which fard salat you are praying at the beginning of the salat. Before you begin the salat, before you say Allahu Akbar, the intention is there present in the mind and heart. And what, as we said, what counts is the intention you had upon the initiation of the salat. The beginning, upon starting the salat, what was the intention? So if he intended a fard salat at the start and initiated with that fard intention, then he forgot. He forgot in the third rak'ah. He forgot, for example, what salat the fard that he's praying, and you thought, am I praying a sunnah? I think I'm praying a sunnah salat. And then he finishes off the salat thinking that he is praying a sunnah, that he made the intention for a sunnah. In this case, the salat is fard. The salat counts as a fard. He has fulfilled the obligation of that dhuhr or asr because he started with that intention. If the intention changed later on in the salat, that does not affect the salat. And the opposite is true. If he started the salat with the intention of nafil, that this is an additional prayer, then later on he thought he's praying a fard and he finished off the salat thinking that he's praying a fard, the salat still counts as a nafil, not as a fard salat. Likewise, if the salat is a wajib salat, then he must specify which wajib salat he's praying. So, usalli al-witr, in his heart, I'm praying the witr, or the salat al-Eid. You must specify if it is a wajib salat, which wajib salat you're praying. 2 rakat after tawaf, or a vowed prayer, or this is a make-up prayer of a additional prayer, nafil, that was invalidated. So these are the examples of the wajib that we mentioned. You must specify what type of wajib you are praying in your heart before you begin that salat. As for the nafil, if it is an additional prayer, then here it is not a condition to specify which nafil you are praying. It's enough to intend salat. Usalli, I'm praying. Allahu Akbar. That is sufficient. Whether it's the emphasized sunnah salat or the non-emphasized sunnah salat. So that is the legal ruling concerning specifying the intention. But even in the nafil, it still remains better to specify which nafil salat, and is more caution and safer to specify which nafil salat that you are praying. Concerning specifying how many rak'at you are praying, that is not necessary. If a person does specify, usalli al-fard al-dhuhr 4 rakat, in his heart he intends 4 rakat, he specifies the amount of rakat. This is not required, but if he does, this is fine. Finally, concerning the intention, if he's praying behind the imam, if he's praying with jama'ah or behind the imam, then he must intend following of the imam. The intention of the iqtida, following the imam, praying the salat of the imam, so that intention must also be there. Muqtadiyan, mu'tamman, usalli fard al-dhuhr, muqtadiyan, mu'tamman. Any intention which indicates that you are joining the salat of the imam. Concerning the final condition, the tahrima, what is implied by at-tahrima is that he opens the salat firstly بِذِكْرٍ خَالِصٍ لِلَّهِ تَعَالَى, with a pure invocation and remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such as saying Allahu Akbar. So it is necessary, it is wajib, that he says the tahrima, he opens the salat with the word Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. If he says Allahu A'zam or Subhanallah, glory be to Allah, Allah Ta'ala is magnificent, he says Allahu A'zam, Subhanallah, then he has fulfilled the condition of the tahrima. He has fulfilled the condition of the tahrima, which is a pure invocation, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Raising the hands, we'll see that is from the emphasized traditions, that is sunnah to raise the hands. But doing that dhikr khalis, that pure invocation, that is the condition. That condition must be fulfilled in order for the salat to be valid. So why was it called tahrima? It was called tahrima means to make something impermissible, haram. Because by saying Allahu Akbar, by doing the tahrima, now you've entered the salat, and those things which were permissible, mubah, before entering the salat, now they have become haram. Those things which are foreign to the salat, eating, drinking, conversation, this becomes haram. So that was the first condition of the tahrima, that it's a pure invocation. Secondly, to not separate between the intention and the opening takbir with any action which is foreign to the salat, like eating or drinking. So if he intends in his heart, I'm praying the fard of dhuhr, then he speaks. He has a conversation with his friend, then he says, Allahu Akbar. And the intention was absent. The intention was separated from the takbirah with that foreign act. the intention was absent from his heart, his starting of the salat is invalid. He has not initiated the salat. As opposed to remembrance of Allah or wudu or walking to the salat. So a person is at home, he gets up to make wudu so that he can pray salat al-dhuhr. He gets up to make wudu so he can pray salat al-dhuhr. So that's the intention has been formed. He's going to pray salat al-dhuhr. He makes wudu and comes back and says Allahu Akbar. That is fine because the intention was not separated from the takbir with an action which is foreign to the salat, such that the intention became absent from his heart. Thirdly, it's also a condition in the tahrima to say it whilst standing before going into ruku', before bowing for the ruku'. So obviously, so this is a condition to be standing when you say tahrima for the one who is able to stand, the one who has some illness or injury which prevents him from standing, then he'll say his takbir sitting. And this is for the fard and the wajib salat, not the nafil salat, which can be performed sitting down. So it's the fard or the wajib, he's able to stand, he must say now Allahu Akbar whilst standing. So this is a common mistake when a person enters the masjid or wants to join the jama'ah and the imam is already in ruku'. Many times it might happen that a person goes into ruku', they're so close to ruku', meaning that the hands can reach the knees. Once your hands can reach your knees, now you are technically in ruku'. Once your hands can reach your knees. So if you've bowed down to that extent where your hands can reach your knees and you said Allahu Akbar at that point, then that takbir is invalid. That takbir for the initiation of the salat is invalid. So he must say it whilst he is closer to the standing position, then go into ruku' behind the imam. The fourth condition is to not delay the intention after the opening takbir. So there was no intention formed in that person's heart. He said, Allahu Akbar. Then he asked himself, which salat am I praying? This is dhuhr. That is invalid. He formed the intention after having said the takbirat al-iftitah, the opening takbir. The fifth condition of the tahrima, to say Allahu Akbar in such a way that he can hear himself, that he hears himself. So you can't say Allahu Akbar in your mind or just move your tongue without hearing yourself. That is invalid. Unless a person is mute, this person is excused, obviously cannot speak. And of course, when we say that you can hear yourself, you must be able to hear yourself. That is in normal conditions where there is no loud sounds around you. So if there are loud sounds around you, to be able to hear yourself, you must speak louder. That is not what is implied. If you were in normal circumstances, you verbalized the takbir such that you were able to hear yourself if you were in normal circumstances without any loud sounds around you. Finally, just some important matters, conditions related to the way we verbalize and we say Allahu Akbar. A person must not stretch any of the hamzas in Allahu Akbar. So we have two hamzas, Allahu Akbar. If a person stretches, then the tahrima is invalid. He has not done a dhikr khalis, a pure invocation, remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he says Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, you have changed the meaning. It is no longer a dhikr khalis, a pure invocation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or if he stretches the ba in Akbar, he says Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. This person has changed the meaning. The tahrima is invalid. Also, not to omit the alif or the ha in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not to omit the alif, the stretch of the lam. If he says Allahu, 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 just the fatha, Allahu, then that is invalid. Or omits the ha, says Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, no ha. You have not done a dhikr khalis, the tahrima is invalid. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in beneficial knowledge. Of the most important knowledge is the knowledge of the conditions of the salat, most important pillar of Islam, and these are the conditions for it to be valid. We ask Allah ta'ala to accept from us our salawat. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.